At 6:12 a.m., I heard the front door slam open so hard it rattled the picture frames. I was brushing my teeth when I heard the sharp voice shout, "You're violating Code 619. My heart dropped. I spat into the sink, grabbed a towel, and rushed out into the hallway barefoot. That's when I saw her. My wife, barefoot too, standing calm as a stone, coffee mug in hand, staring down the barrel of a pistol held by a man in a neon yellow security vest stretched tight across his gut. He was shaking, sweating, and squinting like he'd just wandered into a bear cave with a squirt gun. My wife didn't blink. She just sipped her coffee, looked at him like he was a misbehaving toddler, and said, "You're aiming that wrong. Wrist too tense. Stance all wrong." Then she smiled. "Want me to show you how it's really done?" The man's arm dropped just an inch, and in that second, I swear I saw fear creep into his eyes. He had no idea who he was messing with. The man kept yelling something about a flagpole violation and an unauthorized shade tarp. I couldn't process half of it. I was too busy staring at the glint of the gun in his hand, wondering why a supposed HOA officer needed a sidearm at 7 in the morning. I stepped forward, palms up, trying to calm things. "Sir, you're trespassing. You need to leave." His eyes darted between us. My wife hadn't moved an inch. The man stammered, "This is official business. You're obstructing enforcement." My wife spoke again, quieter this time. "This house is not under HOA jurisdiction. You know that, right?" He ignored her and started motioning to his clipboard like it was a federal warrant. That's when she took one step forward. One step was all it took. He flinched. Hard. She didn't threaten, didn't shout. She just said, "Go back to the board. Tell them the line they just crossed isn't one they'll walk away from." He turned and left. No apology. No explanation. Just a stumbling retreat down our driveway, as if someone had just pulled the pin out of his spine. When he was gone, I turned to her and said the only thing I could think of. "How did you stay so calm?" She didn't even look at me. Just took another sip of her coffee and said, "Because that's the kind of idiot who shoots himself in the foot before aiming." Then she walked into the kitchen and flipped on the kettle like it was just another Tuesday. I followed her in, still processing what had just happened. That guy had a gun. A real one. He could have, she cut me off. He wasn't going to. He didn't even have his safety off. That stunned me. You could tell. She looked at me sideways and said, "Honey, I've handled more weapons than you've seen movies." I could tell the moment he drew. I leaned against the counter, still shaken. Why would an HOA guy even have a gun? That's not normal. She didn't answer. Instead, she opened the pantry, pulled out a small black case I hadn't seen before, and slid it across the table. Because this HOA isn't normal. I opened the case and found photos, complaint slips, and a map of the neighborhood with red XS marked on several homes. She explained, "I've been keeping track. We're not the first to get this treatment. We're just the first who can push back." I blinked. "You've been investigating them?" She shrugged. "Not investigating. Observing. After the third fake violation and that drone buzzing our yard, I got curious." I sat down slowly, staring at the file. "So what now? Do we report him?" She shook her head. "Not yet. That man isn't acting alone. Someone sent him. We make a report now, it gets buried. But if we wait, we see the full play." I looked at her and suddenly remembered the stories she never shared. I knew she was a veteran. I just never asked how deep it went. She always said she did logistics. That morning, I realized logistics probably meant classified missions I can't legally tell you about. Later that afternoon, a neighbor stopped by. Cheryl, 2 doors down, with her dachshund and an armful of lemons from her tree. She looked nervous. "Did something happen this morning? I saw that crazy HOA guy sprinting out of your yard like his pants were on fire." I smiled politely, but my wife cut in. "He was trespassing. Tried to intimidate us. Didn't work." Cheryl hesitated, then leaned in and whispered, "He pulled a gun on someone last week." Old man Vince, down on Redwood. HOA said it was a misunderstanding, but Vince moved out the next day. Packed up overnight. My wife's eyes narrowed. You're sure? Cheryl nodded quickly. He said something about non-compliance and hostile property. He's not well. After Cheryl left, my wife stared at the file again and added a new name to the list. This isn't some random nut. They're trying to drive people out. Target homes one by one. I need to know why. I asked the obvious. Why would an HOA want people gone? She stood up, walked to the garage, and flicked on the lights. What I saw next made my jaw drop. There was a false wall behind the gardening shelves. She pulled it open, revealing a small room, walls lined with gear. Tactical boot. Surveillance equipment. A long duffel bag I knew better than to ask about. And on one side, a neat row of medals and framed commendations. I took a step inside, silent. I read the one at eye level. Navy Special Warfare Command. My wife was not a logistics officer. She looked back at me and finally said what I think she'd been holding back for years. I left that life behind to build something quiet, peaceful. But if they think they can threaten my home and get away with it, they picked the wrong damn address. I swallowed. Hard. So, what's the plan? She smiled again. Not a warm smile. A calculated one. First, we find out what they're really hiding. Then, we make sure they regret waking me up before I finished my coffee. And just like that, the mission had begun. Not a military mission. A neighborhood mission. But the stakes were just as high. And the enemy? They didn't even know a war had started yet. By the next morning, the garage had transformed from a simple storage space into what I could only describe as a tactical command post. My wife stood in the center, adjusting the angle of a mounted camera feed that showed a grainy view of our driveway from 3 angles. The air smelled faintly of WD-40 and black coffee. She had dragged out our old camping table and laid out documents, blueprints, and a massive neighborhood zoning map with small red stickers dotting specific homes. I stared at it all and muttered, "This is getting serious." She didn't look up. It was already serious. You just didn't know it yet. I took a breath. You really think the HOA is targeting homes? She finally turned to me. I don't think. I know. And I think they're doing it to clear space for something bigger. She tapped a section of the zoning map near our backyard. See this parcel here? This is your favorite hammock spot, right? I nodded. They just filed a redevelopment proposal with the city council last month to convert that entire greenbelt into a community wellness retreat. I blinked. That's our property. She gave a tight smile. Not according to their proposal. They used an outdated map. Convenient, right? She clicked through camera feeds showing different angles of our property. Our driveway, the mailbox, even the storm drain across the street. I'm not paranoid, she said softly. I've seen this play out before. Pressure the target. Shake them up. Get them to leave voluntarily so you don't have to pay market value. It's clean. Quiet. But it only works if the target stays passive. I stared at the screen. They're trying to force people to sell? She nodded. And they're hiding it under the pretense of code enforcement. Then she handed me a thick manila folder labeled Operation Compliance. It wasn't military, but it was methodical. The folder had printouts of city council meeting minutes, HOA newsletters, satellite overlays, and even anonymized email threads between board members. Screenshotted from what she explained was a public-facing error in their online portal. She grinned, half proud. Never leave your admin credentials in the footer. I glanced through the pages. One message stood out. Push on the non-compliant ones. Use Marcus if they get loud. I paused. Marcus? The gun guy. She nodded. Marcus Klein. Hired as HOA enforcement. No actual security license, but lots of traffic stops and a restraining order from a former tenant he tried to evict personally. They've weaponized him. That afternoon, we started reaching out to neighbors. Quietly. My wife was careful. She approached people who'd already shown signs of trouble, like Vince, who had vanished. Like the lady across the street who got fined for planting tomatoes. Like Cheryl, who saw the morning meltdown and was already on edge. In the span of 2 hours, 4 neighbors came over for what looked like casual coffee. But inside, each of them got a full breakdown of what the HOA had been doing, complete with paper copies to take home. By the end of the day, we had a loose circle of 7 people. Quiet allies. She called it Operation Neighbors First. And it wasn't just about surveillance. It was about knowing the law better than the people pretending to enforce it. She created checklists for what to record during HOA visit. Gave out refurbished doorbell cameras she'd collected from old military contact. Even walked 3 elderly neighbors through their property boundaries using a GPS app and confirmed them with public plat map. It was low-tech but tight. And it worked. Because the next time Marcus showed up, this time to harass a young couple about unauthorized fencing, he didn't realize 3 different phones were recording him from different angles. He left cursing and empty-handed. Then, things got strange. One morning, a plain brown envelope appeared on our doorstep. No name. No postage. Just tucked under the welcome mat. My wife opened it and laid the contents on the table without a word. There were printed photos, clear as day. Marcus, the HOA president, and a man with a recognizable face. A real estate developer who had been lobbying for land annexations for months. They were at a poker table, drinks in hand. The timestamp was 2 nights ago. One photo showed a document on the table with our lot number highlighted in yellow. I leaned in. "What is this?" She didn't blink. "Proof." We didn't know who sent it. But whoever did wanted us to know 2 things. 1. The HOA was directly involved in shady backroom deals with developers, and 2. They had just escalated. If they were plotting around our specific lot, then we weren't just another target. We were the next one. My wife scanned the images and uploaded them into a secure drive. Then she pulled out a worn leather notebook and flipped through its pages until she found a number. "Who are you calling?" I asked. She replied calmly. "An old friend who owes me a favor. We're going to need a drone." That evening, the drone hovered above the HOA's main office building, a converted townhouse with locked doors and an ego problem. The drone fed a live stream to her tablet. It showed a side entrance with a new keypad lock. 2 cars parked outside, Marcus's dented Jeep and the HOA president's luxury sedan. No one noticed the drone. But it noticed them. More than that, it recorded something we didn't expect. The president came out back, talking on the phone, loudly. "I don't care how you get her out. I want that property in escrow by next month." He was pacing, furious. The camera caught every word. My wife turned to me. "You ready to take this to the next level?" I hesitated. "You mean legal action?" She shook her head. "That comes later. First, we need to disable their power. And not just the lights." She pointed to the HOA bylaws. "Their power comes from fear and ignorance. We cut that off, they fall apart." I looked at the drone feed one more time. Marcus was now outside, pacing with a flashlight. Maybe he sensed the air shifting. He didn't know how fast that shift was about to come. As we powered down the setup for the night, I asked my wife something that had been bothering me. "Why are you so calm about this?" "I'd be furious." She glanced up from her files. "Because when someone draws a weapon on your home, they think they're in control. But when they realize you let them live long enough to realize their mistake, that's when the real fight begins." I didn't sleep much that night. But I knew she did. Like a soldier on the eve of a mission, not afraid, just waiting for the first move. 3 days later, everything changed again. We were halfway through breakfast when the power in the backyard shed cut out. I thought it was just a fuse. But when I stepped outside, I saw the gate swinging open, and a man in a familiar neon vest crouching beside the electrical box with bolt cutters in hand. Marcus. My stomach dropped. He hadn't even knocked. Just walked in like he owned the place. My wife appeared behind me, cereal spoon still in her hand. She saw him. Her voice didn't rise. "That's the last mistake you'll ever make on this property." Marcus turned, startled, dropping the cutters. "You're violating local code on unlicensed power lines," he snapped. "This is unauthorized structure, non-compliant. Section 24-9. She didn't respond. She just looked at me and said, "Go inside." I hesitated. "What are you, inside?" "Now." I listened. Through the kitchen window, I watched her walk toward him, slow and deliberate. Marcus put a hand on something in his pocket. Maybe mace, maybe worse. But before he could act, he was blinded. Motion sensor lights she'd installed a day earlier burst on, aimed directly at eye level. He stumbled, yelling. That's when the hidden speaker under the porch kicked in, blasting low-frequency tactical noise loud enough to rattle the windows. He dropped to one knee, confused and disoriented. By the time I stepped outside again, against her instructions, she had him on his back, zip-tied at the wrists with his face in the dirt. No bruises. No broken bones. Just clean, precise control. She knelt beside him and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then she stood up, pulled out her phone, and dialed the local sheriff's office. "I need deputies at our address. We have a trespasser detained. Unarmed. Attempted property sabotage. Yes, I have video. Multiple angles." She hung up. No emotion in her face. Like clockwork. When the police arrived 10 minutes later, they weren't the least bit surprised. One of the deputies, a tall man with a buzz cut, recognized her immediately. "Ma'am, hadn't seen you since the foundation fundraiser 2 years ago." She nodded. "Didn't want to call you unless it was necessary." Marcus started yelling the moment they cut the zip ties. "She attacked me. She rigged the place. She's dangerous." The deputy turned to him, calm as a Sunday preacher. "Sir, we've seen the footage. You entered the property without notice, tampered with electrical lines, and refused to leave when asked. That's felony trespass." Marcus's face turned red. "I'm a security officer for the HOA." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "You're not licensed. That vest doesn't mean anything." Then, to my wife, he added, "You want to press charges?" She looked at Marcus. Hard. Cold. Then said, "Not yet. Let him go. But make sure the report is on public record." The deputies nodded. One of them leaned close and whispered, "He's a problem. We've had complaints. This might be the nail." As Marcus was escorted off the property, still shouting threats, my wife went back to the kitchen like she had just taken out the trash. I followed her in, stunned. "Why didn't you press charges?" She shrugged. "Because now I own the narrative. Not just legally, but publicly." Over the next 24 hours, the story spread like wildfire. Cheryl called. So did 4 other neighbors. One of them had already seen the doorbell cam footage my wife shared with them, edited to be crystal clear, with a timestamp, but no excessive drama. Just the truth. "You're like a neighborhood myth now," one of them said. "Like a suburban Batman." My wife just smiled. No cape. Just boundaries. Meanwhile, the HOA scrambled. A letter arrived the next day, thinly veiled as an apology from the board, blaming Marcus's actions on unauthorized overreach and claiming they were reviewing internal protocols. My wife read it once, then slid it into a binder labeled paper trail. "They're buying time," she said. "They know they're exposed. But they haven't figured out how much I know yet." I asked, "So what do we do next?" She flipped open her notebook. "We move. Fast. Before they regroup." That night, we held a discreet gathering. 7 neighbors, hand-picked, all affected by HOA overreach in one way or another. Some had been fined thousands. Others harassed for landscaping choices. One elderly couple almost lost their property over a fraudulent lien. My wife laid everything out. They're using fabricated rules to scare people, then pushing them out so developers can buy cheap and build fast. We've traced at least 6 properties transferred that way. The room buzzed with disbelief. But no one left. Everyone stayed. Everyone wanted in. Then she handed out folders, each one tailored to the recipient's specific property rights, legal protections, and steps to take during the next HOA interaction. It wasn't just strategy, it was empowerment. And it worked. The next morning, 2 households filed formal challenges against the HOA's enforcement right. Another neighbor put up a sign, "Private property. No trespassing. Authorized access only." The mood in the neighborhood shifted. Fear was evaporating, but the pressure was building. And then came the threat. A manila envelope, no return address, dropped in our mailbox without postage. Inside, printed screenshots of her personal Facebook photos, old ones from her service days. One of them had a red circle drawn around her face. Another note read, "Not all secrets stay buried. Retire quietly." My heart sank. I looked at her, expecting fury or panic. But she didn't even blink. She picked up the envelope, burned it in the grill, and said, "They just made a fatal mistake." I asked, "What do you mean?" She turned to me, voice steady. "They're trying to scare a Navy SEAL. That tells me they're desperate. And when people are desperate, they get sloppy." She didn't sleep that night. She reviewed every document, every message thread, every video clip. By dawn, she had built a full case file, a legal and digital trap. But she wasn't done. "Tomorrow," she said, "we go to the meeting. Not to beg. To record." The monthly HOA meeting was set for the next evening. And they had no idea what was coming. Not from the neighbors. And definitely not from her. Because they thought they were just dealing with a woman who planted petunias and drank coffee. They still had no idea who they'd pulled a gun on. But they were about to find out. The HOA meeting was held in the clubhouse at the far end of the neighborhood, a faux luxury building with crown molding and brittle folding chairs that always smelled faintly of mildew and lemon-scented cleaner. It was packed. More than usual. Word had spread. Every chair was filled. People stood along the walls, murmuring. The HOA president, Raymond J. Ackers, stood at the podium in a pinstripe suit that screamed control issues. His smile was tight, rehearsed. Fake. My wife walked in 5 minutes late, on purpose, and the entire room turned to look. She wore jeans, a simple navy blue windbreaker, and mirrored sunglasses, indoors. She didn't speak. Just walked to the back row, nodded once to a few of the neighbors we'd briefed the night before, and took a seat near the window. In her pocket, a small button-sized microphone was already recording. I sat beside her, trying to look like a bored husband. But inside, my heart was pounding. Ackers began with his usual community gratitude speech, thanking everyone for cooperation during these uncertain regulatory updates, and understanding the evolving responsibilities of the HOA board. It was all fluff, like a pastry without filling. Then came the agenda: tree height enforcement, paint color disputes, and a sudden emergency item listed vaguely as land use clarification. That was the one we were waiting for. Ackers launched into a monologue about maximizing green spaces for shared health purposes. But then he pulled up a map on the projector, a modified neighborhood zoning layout. My jaw tightened. It showed a newly proposed community trail that cut right through our backyard. And not just ours, 4 other private properties too. The trail would be funded by an anonymous development grant. The board had voted internally last week to pursue it. "It's all for wellness and community," he said. "We're proud to be ahead of the curve." My wife raised her hand. Ackers froze for a beat, clearly hoping to avoid her. "Yes, the woman in back?" She stood. Calmly. "You failed to mention this trail would pass directly through property that is not HOA land." Ackers chuckled like a man trying to win over a crowd. "That's a bit of a misunderstanding. The city zoning database," she interrupted. "Outdated. I've already pulled the new GIS plats, cross-referenced with tax record. Those lots remain privately owned. That trail cuts through legally untouchable ground." The room stirred. Murmurs turned into full-on whispers. My wife continued. And more concerning? The meeting minutes from last month were altered. The development item wasn't included then, but it's retroactively listed now. Sloppy. Someone near the front asked, "Is that true?" Ackers tried to regain control. "I assure you, we're acting within the rights granted by our charter." She took a step forward. "Then maybe you can explain this." She pulled a flash drive from her pocket and held it up. She handed it to the meeting coordinator, who reluctantly plugged it into the projector. The room went dark and a video played, grainy footage, night vision lit. It was from our drone. Ackers on a call behind the HOA office, pacing, angry. "I don't care how you get her out. I want that property in escrow by next month. Send Marcus if she pushes." A gasp ran through the room. Then a pause. The audio was crystal clear. There was no denying it. Ackers' face went pale. "That recording is illegal. That's surveillance." My wife replied, "Wrong. The camera never entered private property. The footage was gathered from public airspace over a commercial property during non-operating hours. It's legal, admissible, and," she paused, looking directly at him, "already sent to the city council, the police, and 2 local reporters." People were no longer whispering. Now it was shouting. Someone yelled, "This is corruption." Another neighbor stood and pointed. "I got fined $300 for painting my door. Meanwhile, you're plotting land theft." A third neighbor, quiet old Mrs. Lansing of all people, stood and said, "You tried to push me out. I knew it. You people are disgusting." The meeting spiraled into chaos. Board members began quietly slipping out. Ackers stayed frozen at the podium, sweating through his collar. My wife leaned over to him and said something only I heard. "Checkmate." We left the meeting before it collapsed entirely. Outside, the air was thick with people asking questions, demanding resignations, and filming on their phones. My wife kept walking. She didn't say much. But when we got home, she sat down at the kitchen table and took off her sunglasses. "They're going to try something stupid," she said. "Cornered animals always do." And sure enough, they did. 2 hours later, we received an email from the HOA board's legal rep. It was a cease and desist. Laughable. They accused her of unauthorized surveillance, intimidation, and defamation. My wife laughed out loud. This is their move? A weak civil bluff. She didn't reply to the email. She forwarded it, along with the drone footage and a legal analysis, to a contact she referred to as Jess from JAG. Apparently, Jess owed her a favor. Former military prosecutor, now specializing in real estate fraud cases. But the real gift came the next morning. An anonymous tip. A call from a blocked number. If you want to know what they've really done, check the water permit files. Click. No name. No voice ID. Just a lead. My wife looked it up. And what she found took this entire mess to a new level. The HOA had submitted fraudulent water infrastructure permits, claiming to maintain and operate shared lines that didn't exist. It was a paper shell game, designed to siphon city grant money for community upgrades that never happened. They'd collected over $80,000 across 2 years. On paper, they installed irrigation. In reality, they hired a cousin with a weed whacker and kept the rest. She didn't wait. She sent a full report, screenshots, grant statements, bank record inconsistencies, to the County Inspector General's office. We didn't hear anything back right away. But we didn't need to. That afternoon, a black SUV pulled into the HOA office parking lot. 2 men in plain suits entered with clipboards. 10 minutes later, they walked out with a box of files. The real investigation had started. My wife sat back on our porch that night, watching the sun set over the pine trees. She took a slow sip of coffee, her 4th that day, and finally spoke. That wasn't just a takedown. That was exposure. Now we wait for the house to fall. I asked, and what if they fight back? She smiled. Let them. The deeper they dig, the bigger the hole they'll bury themselves in. And deep down, I knew something had changed in the neighborhood forever. This wasn't just about code violations or land disputes anymore. This was war. But my wife wasn't just winning. She was teaching them what happens when you pull a gun on someone who spent her life training to be unshakable. 3 days after the HOA meeting imploded, a public notice appeared taped to every mailbox in the neighborhood. Bright yellow, laminated, and stamped with the HOA's official seal. Community Redevelopment Initiative, it read. Phase 1. Wellness Trail construction to begin pending approval. Below that, in bold, Emergency zoning adjustment in progress. My wife stared at it for 5 seconds, then crumpled it and dropped it in the trash. They're going for it anyway, she said flatly. They know they've lost the public. Now they're trying to race the law. She opened her laptop and began typing. It wasn't a complaint. It was a full petition for injunctive relief, complete with citations, land surveys, and a notarized deed. I didn't even know we had a notary in the neighborhood. Turns out Cheryl was one, and she had stopped by that morning with fresh muffins and a portable stamp. My wife didn't even pause to eat. They're trying to annex our backyard, she said as she clicked through county records. If they get emergency approval before the audit finishes, they'll be grandfathered in. They're gambling the city won't catch up in time. The HOA president, Ackers, had gone underground. No more meetings, no returned emails, no public appearances. But someone, maybe him, maybe whoever still answered to him, had filed the annexation motion with the county zoning board. A quiet hearing had been scheduled in 2 days. No neighbor notifications. No transparency. Just a line of legal jargon buried on page 12 of the public docket. They think we're sleeping, my wife said. But they forgot who they woke up. She didn't go in alone. She walked into that hearing with a thick binder of documents, 3 neighbors who had been directly impacted, and, unbeknownst to the board, a local journalist she'd contacted 2 weeks prior. The room was small, stuffy, and filled with people in business suits who looked like they hadn't stepped outside in years. One of them, the zoning chair, squinted at the annexation request and said, "This is requesting authority over 5 private parcels?" My wife stood. Incorrect. It's requesting illegal authority over 5 private parcels, 2 of which were intentionally misrepresented as vacant easements. She passed out copies of the current land surveys, time-stamped drone photos, and official deed record. Then she delivered the kill shot. This map was drawn using pre-rezoning lines from 8 years ago. The annexation request relies on a zoning grid that no longer legally exists. The room went silent. One board member cleared his throat. "And your interest in this matter?" My wife didn't miss a beat. "I own one of those parcels. And I'm a retired Navy SEAL. I've fought actual wars for this country. I won't lose my backyard to a forged PDF and a corporate footnote." The zoning board didn't vote immediately. But they didn't approve the annexation either. The motion was tabled pending verification, which, in government speak, meant this just got a spotlight we weren't expecting. Outside the chamber, the journalist approached my wife and introduced herself formally. "This'll make a hell of a story," she said. "And the water permit fraud angle?" My wife handed her a second file. Names, amounts, fake contractors, and where to look next. Just make sure it goes public before they find a shredder. Back home, she was quiet. Not shaken, never that. Just focused. "They'll retaliate," she said. "When people lose money and power, they don't go quietly." She was right. That night, we heard a noise in the backyard. At first, I thought it was just raccoons. But when I turned on the floodlights, we saw movement at the back fence. A shadow darted off. Too big to be an animal. My wife was already out the door with a flashlight and a phone. No confrontation. But she found fresh boot prints in the dirt by the fence, and a single footprint on the side of our utility box. The next morning, she filed a formal police report. But more importantly, she sent the photos to every neighbor on our growing email list with the subject line, "They're getting desperate." That day, 2 more neighbors installed motion sensors. 3 more replaced locks. and one couple filed a lawsuit against the HOA for repeated harassment. The dominoes were falling. And then it happened. Akers snapped. It was just after sunset. We were on the porch when we heard tires screech. A black Mercedes tore around the corner and came to a hard stop in front of our driveway. Akers got out, alone, sweating through his dress shirt and yelling before he was even halfway to the porch. "You think you're some kind of hero," he shouted. "You're destroying everything. These houses were going to be worth double in 2 years. You don't get it. We were going to sell the whole block." My wife stood, calm. "Like always. You just confessed to attempted land fraud in front of 3 cameras," she said. "Smile if you want it to go viral." I gestured subtly to the motion cameras. Red lights on. Rolling. Akers looked around, panicked. "You ruined everything. You don't know who I work with." She stepped closer. "Neither do they. But they're about to find out what you've cost them." He made the mistake of stepping onto the porch, and the bigger mistake of pointing a finger in her face. That was all she needed. She raised her hand, just one finger, and pointed behind him. A sheriff cruiser had pulled up silently behind his car. 2 deputies stepped out. One of them said, "Mr. Akers, we have a warrant." "Step away from the porch." He spun, confused. "What warrant? For what?" The deputy stepped forward, hand on cuff. "Wire fraud. False filings. City funds misuse. You've got a lot of people wanting answers." Akers' face broke. He wasn't a lion anymore. Just a house cat caught in the wrong yard. As they cuffed him, my wife said only one thing. "You should have stuck to newsletters." That night we sat on the porch again. Same coffee mugs. Same breeze. Except now the neighborhood was different. Kids rode bikes past our gate without fear. Cheryl stopped by with banana bread and said 3 neighbors had torn up their HOA contracts that afternoon. Even the old man across the street, who never waved at anyone, gave us a thumbs up. I asked my wife what came next. She just said, "Rest." Then paused. "But not for too long. There's still cleanup to do. Burn the rot. Plant something new." I nodded, then asked, "And if someone else tries to take control?" She smiled and looked out at the dark. "Then they better come armed with more than a clipboard." It had been exactly 3 weeks since Akers was led away in handcuffs, sweat pouring down his temples, muttering something about restructuring deals, and nobody's fault but the city. The HOA office had been shut down, locked with a county-issued seal, and the once feared compliance officers had vanished like cockroaches when the lights come on. The neon vests were gone. The fines stopped. The newsletters went silent. For the first time in years, the neighborhood was quiet. Not just in sound, but in spirit. The HOA didn't recover. Too many lawsuits, too many headlines. Within 10 days, the board members resigned en masse. A formal dissolution was announced by mail, ironically in the same style as the passive-aggressive violations they used to love. Thin, white envelopes that usually carried bad news. This time, it said, "Due to internal misconduct and criminal investigations, the Willow Pines Homeowners Association will cease operations effective immediately." Below it, in smaller print, it read, "Community representation will be voluntary and informal, pending future resident elections." My wife read it aloud, folded it carefully, and placed it in the same binder marked paper trail. Then she smiled. "That's the last time they'll send anything with threats attached." Neighbors began to breathe again. The signs came down. The arbitrary citations were tossed. Even the air felt lighter. Someone started mowing their lawn diagonally just because they could. Another guy strung up blue holiday lights in April, and when I asked him why, he just said, "Because nobody can find me for it anymore." For the first time, people were actually talking. Barbecues started happening again. Kids played in driveways without being shooed inside. One family even reclaimed the community park, once padlocked by the HOA for unsanctioned gatherings, and turned it into a weekend farmers market. My wife refused to take credit, but everyone knew who to thank. People started calling her the Seal. Not in a mocking way, more like in awe. Like a legend who lived right here, among the pines. At first, she shrugged it off. Said it was all strategy and paperwork. But then people began asking her for advice. On real boundaries, on surveillance legality, on how to fight fraud. One teenage girl asked how to stay calm in scary situations. My wife just handed her a pocket journal and said, "Start by observing more than reacting." That girl still carries it around like it's holy scripture. One day, the sheriff stopped by. Not because of a complaint, just to shake her hand. He had heard about her service. He'd watched the body cam footage from the day she zip-tied Marcus into the dirt and handed the officers everything they needed. "Most people panic in a fight," he said. "You planned one." She just replied, "I've had worse mornings." He smiled, nodded, and left with a promise. "If you ever need backup, ma'am, just say the word." She never joined the new committee that replaced the HOA. When they offered her a leadership role, she declined. "I don't manage people," she said. "I just remove threats." Instead, she helped from the background, reviewing documents, watching zoning proposals, quietly guiding neighbors on how to protect what was theirs without needing to go nuclear. She preferred the quiet life. Always had. One day, while trimming the hedges, Cheryl asked her the question I had been thinking about for weeks. "Why didn't you just move away? When they came after you? When that guy pulled a gun? Why didn't you run?" My wife set down the shears, wiped her forehead, and answered in that same even voice. "Because when you've spent years overseas defending your country, you don't give up your backyard to a man with a clipboard." Cheryl just nodded. She didn't ask anything else. But perhaps the most surreal moment came when a local news team requested an interview. Not a puff piece, the journalist promised. Just a story about how one woman shut down a corrupt HOA. My wife declined. Politely but firmly. "I didn't do it for press. I did it because someone had to." When I asked her later why she didn't want people to know, she said something I'll never forget. "I didn't want to be remembered for what I tore down. I want this neighborhood to remember what it stood up for." On a cool Saturday morning, we sat together on the porch. She had her usual coffee. I had tea. The breeze rolled through the trees, and for once, no one was measuring the grass or sending passive-aggressive notices about a mailbox color. I asked her how she felt, now that it was all over. She smiled faintly. "It's never over. There's always someone who wants power more than peace. But now people know they can push back. That matters." She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. It was a handwritten list, things to watch for. Signs of quiet corruption. Legal rights most people forget. Emergency contact. And at the top, written in her blocky, precise handwriting, "When they come knocking, don't answer with fear." I asked what she planned to do with it. She looked at the kids playing across the street. "Teach it. Quietly. One neighbor at a time." That night, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the porch light flicked on, a neighbor walking by waved and called out, "Thank you for everything." My wife raised her coffee mug in reply. She didn't need a parade. Or applause. The peace was enough. The safety. The sound of kids laughing where silence used to live. Nobody pulls a gun around here anymore. Not without knowing whose porch they're walking up to.